Hey everybody, Nick here, and today it brings me great joy to award the Knife of the Year award for the year 2021. This is something I've done every year since the start of the channel, and basically I just choose the pieces of gear in 3 different categories that I think are the best. And this is very amorphous, right? It has many different elements to it, and ultimately it's very subjective, it's very personal, but these are the things that I think are the very best knives of the year. More specifically, a couple of rules. I'm doing December to December, so this will be from December 2020 to December 2021, so that way it's, I can get it filmed and whatnot. And they also have to be relatively recent releases. It can't just be like, hey, Spydeco Delica won again. I'm not allowing re-releases of prior winners, so if a brand new version of like the TRM Neutron, a past winner, came out, that's not going to count. I'm focusing on widespread releases rather than limited editions or sprint runs. Certainly availability is tricky, but that's a thing. And these are choosing the very best pieces, and that's on a variety of different areas. So anyways, that's that. And I'm also going to focus right now in this video on Knife of the Year. I'm going to do a separate video about other gear, and I'm doing 3 different categories. There is the under $100 category, there is the under $300 category, and by the way, I'm counting 298 as 300. Yeah, nice try. And then there is the Sky's the Limit category, which goes $300 and above. So those are the 3 categories. I'm going to pick a winner in each and then pick a grand winner of them all. And then one other quick note. 2021 has been one of the busiest years I have ever had. Remember, I have a day job. This is not my career. This is a hobby, a thing I do on the side. And so I've probably missed a bunch of gems out there in the world. These are my personal favorites of what's come across the table, but let me know your favorites down below. And if you feel like I missed something absolutely amazing, let me know in the comments and maybe it'll show up for next year. It's never too late, right? So there is that. First, though, a couple of notes on 2021 in the knife-making world, basically. This has been, in many ways, the worst year I can remember for the production knife market. And I don't mean that in the sense that no one's selling knives or anything like that. In fact, quite the opposite, but it's been boring. There have been very few new releases, a lot of kind of ho-hum, hey, look, another $45 knife from Savi. It's in D2, yay! And then a couple of bright spots, and those bright spots are going to show up on the table here today. There's also been massive supply chain disruptions, making it very hard for companies to drop new ideas, and yet a lot of the companies were running at full tilt, with retailers having trouble keeping in stock. I've been hearing over and over again from partners in industry and in retail, I'm selling everything I'm making, but I can't make enough, and at the same time, I keep placing orders, but they can't fill them. And so my understanding is that everybody's trying desperately to get more knives, both made and for sale, and everyone's having trouble. And with relatively few exceptions, right now in December, late November of 2021, that is. Oh God, not again, not 2021 again. But there are 2 kinds of knives at this point. There are good knives, and there are knives that you can actually purchase in stock right now. So I'm going to have to be a little more fast and loose with can you buy it, given this supply chain constraints. One other very notable thing that is missing this year from my top 9 contenders is Spydeco. Spydeco is a company that has usually had a couple of different entries of new interesting models in the contest, and this year they have none. In fact, they've seemed to focus entirely on rehashing old models, doing dealer exclusives and more. Honestly, this year, Spydeco has been basically like track and field day. Lots of sprinting, lots of medals, but very few people actually give a damn what happened over there. Right? I hope that this was just the path of least resistance given supply chain woes, but it's honestly sad to see one of the best competitors in the space completely sit it out the year, right? Doing nothing but rehashing old work for the PM2 Beanie Baby collectors while struggling to keep a lot of the base production in stock. I'm very much hoping that next year they'll be back in the game and show us the innovation that got them to where they are today, but right now it's a very empty chair at this table, and I figured it's worth commenting, right? Because every year there's something, and this year there is nothing. So anyways, that's been 2021. In a lot of ways, very, very boring. Great sales. Everybody, they're selling everything they can make, but not a whole lot of new, right? And so in a lot of ways, you're going to see novelty heavily rewarded. So our 3 categories that we're going to deal with are, again, relatively budget-focused, under $100, mid-range, up to $300, and high-end, the sky is the limit. We're going to start off in the budget country. So in budget country here, first off, a couple of honorable mentions, right? One of them is the Real Steel Qriket. This is a very weird knife, but it's relatively unique, right? It is a piece. I believe that was Ivan Braginets who did a piece. I don't actually have one anymore. They both went up for charity, but at the same time, it was a really cool piece, very unusual and relatively huge, right? So I think a lot of people found it interesting. A little big, a little strange for my ultimate taste, but kind of a cool piece. Another one worth mentioning is the Crkt Cinco, which is a very nice design. It's a Richard Rogers design. But it's just done profoundly well. It's got a nice unassisted action. It's got it works quite well. This is a knife that I'm very, very pleased with overall, and I think is one of the better budget entries in this year's budget category. Then finally, the Real Steel Real Slim very nearly made it into this. But this is a very strange knife. It's in VG10. It's got an exceptionally thin blade and thin body. This is one of the thinner knives that's really out there right now, and it's very, very weird. I don't know exactly who this is for, but it is kind of a cool piece, and I think it is something that is unique and unusual and merits consideration as you're thinking about the budget world. But let's go to our actual candidates, and there are 3 candidates that I've selected as the top 3. The first one is this guy. This is the Artisan Arroyo. This dropped last year, but the video of it and my review of it, it missed the cutoff last year, so this is, for the first time, eligible for my Year of the Year award, and it is very good, right? It is a very good knife, sort of more generally speaking. It's in their AR RPM, there being Artisans, AR RPM 9 steel, which is their own powder metallurgy sort of thing. It has a very nice design. In this case, it is a Dirk Pinkerton design. It is very unique, it is very ergonomic, it works really well in the hand with lots of gription, and frankly, it is a really solid little everyday carry choice, right? This is a great, great knife, and it's been something I've recommended a bunch this year just because it is really good, and it is really unique. It's a little off the beaten path, and it's a nice reminder that design makes the difference. Next up on the list here is the Savi Baby Banter. This is a knife that I did not expect would end up making the list, but as I carried it more and more, it was like, damn, this is functional. It is a powerfully functional little knife that offers a really compelling alternative to the Spydeco Dragonfly. It's in the very much the same size class, that is, but at the same time, it is cheaper. That's a very nice thing, and it's also just going to appeal, I think, a little bit more widely, right? It seems a little bit less threatening for a lot of folks, and I think this is a knife that has a lot of appeal, not just to people in the knife world. In fact, one could even argue it primarily is going to appeal to people outside the conventional knife world, and I think that's a beautiful thing. So this is a great functional tool that I think is going to have pretty broad appeal and is a very nice choice, and one I've recommended a fair amount. Then finally, this is the weird one, but it was the one that I just, like, yeah, it had to be there, right? This is the Qriket Ritual. This is, in many ways, I can't believe this is on the table at all, but it makes a lot of sense, because if you look at the budget knife lineup for this year, it was filled to the brim with inoffensive milquetoast hotel art knives, usually made overseas in China. And don't get me wrong, this one was made overseas as well, but at the same time, this is very far from being inoffensive milquetoast hotel art, right? This is its own unique thing. This is something completely unique, completely ridiculous, completely over the top, and frankly, completely silly. But it evokes a very strong emotional response in anybody who handles it, whether it's like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, to, oh my God, this thing is ridiculous, to, oh my God, I want one. I think this is something that actually is going to make people feel something either direction, and it's going to send freaking Edna in the lunchroom diving under the table if you bust this out, cut up your apple. But nonetheless, this evokes a very strong feeling, and honestly, I gotta give credit for that, right? In a world where there are too many knives that are being released over and over again. Here, I'll swap these around so I can get the freaking ritual on camera. But in a world where there's a bunch of boring out there, this is very much not boring. It is its own thing, and as a result, even though it's not the most functional thing ever, it is outstanding. And I think this is not at risk. I'm not at risk of carrying, but in the name of rewarding people pushing boundaries and trying new things, I think this has to be a contender. So those are my 3 contenders for the budget knife category. In the mid-range. First off, a couple of honorable mentions, one of which is the ProTech Runt number 5. This particular model is a hand-ground version, an exclusive, but the Runt 5 is a really nice little knife. It is very, very cool. The problem with it is, and the reason it didn't make the final cut, so to speak, is that there were a bunch of other options out there in this kind of a size range, and Cali Legal's not going to be for everybody. It's a really nice choice, though, and I think it is a pretty cool piece, and I'm really glad to see them rehashing old designs and improving them in that way. Another thing that's worth considering is the Terrain 365 Otter, which is a very nice knife with an interesting blade material, Terravantium, but ultimately it was a knife that ended up getting displaced by the Bear, another slip joint in my life, and ultimately it didn't end up making the cut. And frankly, this was a really hard category to fill the slate of competitors because there just wasn't that much going on in this range. A lot of companies went very high end, doing, $400, $500, $600 stuff, and a lot of budget knife stuff went on, a lot of churn at the low level, but very few people were in this sweet spot. The other one that is very strange, but I think is worthwhile, is this little guy right here. This is the Monterey Bay Knives Field Trekker. This is a fixed blade. Yes, that's right, a fixed blade made the Knife of the Year ballot. That's strange, but it is profoundly well done. It's a very nice piece of object, frankly. It's a very, very nice knife with a very nice grind, all of that kind of stuff, good blade, and the sheath on it is freaking amazing too. This was a knife that very nearly made it into the final cut of the possible options there. It is very rare that a fixed blade catches my fancy, let alone that it makes me go like, wait, this could be a contender. But that one absolutely is. But let's go on to the final candidates, the slate of ones that are worth talking about here. So to start with, actually, we've got the TRM Shadow here. This is Three Rivers Manufacturing, and they are no stranger to Knife of the Year contests, right? The Shadow is a new knife from them that is decidedly larger, that is decidedly bigger and beefier, and overall just very, I don't know, it feels a little bit more serious. It feels a lot more heavy-duty than some of the atoms and the neutrons and things like that. I think this is going to appeal to a class of people who might not have loved the neutrons and the shadows and such, but at the same time, it has a blade that still cuts very, very well. Made out of 20 CV here in the USA, and it's also using a sliding bar-style lock that is just profoundly well done. This is showing us just how good those sliding bar locks can be when they're really done right. And so, in a lot of ways, not only is this proof that larger knives can still be great cutting tools with nice thin stock, but it's also going to appeal to people who might not have found some of TRM's prior outings to be that interesting. And at $279, it falls firmly into our mid-range category and is a very nice choice. Next one on the list here is the Tactile Knife Company it's Bear. This is spelled B-E-X-A-R. I'm sorry, that's Bexa. But anyways, the Bear here is $199 and is a completely cool knife. This is their second knife that they have ever made, and it is awesome, but it's mostly awesome on this dimension. This is a very, very thin, tiny little knife here. I mean, in terms of blade length, it's actually not all that tiny here. If we, measure it up, it's just under 3 inches, but it carries so small. It carries just beautifully on this guy. And with a very thin blade, incredible cutting geometry, a nice blade generally, lots of interesting steel variations, the action that is, I think, better than expected, and honestly, it's just good. It is an instant gem and a spot of hope, frankly, in a very, very boring year for knives. So the Bear here is absolutely great and is a really nice choice here. Then finally, this is a very odd choice, but this is the Benchmade Bug Out wearing a set of crossfade scales from Flytanium. This is not a knife that you can buy stock in this way. And in fact, this one's been anodized by Flytanium, but you can get it doesn't really change the scale opinion. It's just, thing is, the Benchmade Bug Out is a knife that's an older release, right? And the Flytanium crossfade scales are what are new here. But it turns out that when you take a Bug Out, which is $130, and you buy a set of the scales for it, $69, nice. You end up with a knife that is very, very different than the Bug Out itself. I didn't care for the Bug Out. Just felt a little flimsy, felt a little bit too light. It didn't really work for me. But it turns out that when you put a really nice set of artistically designed titanium handles on it, it's a whole different world, right? And so I don't like the Bug Out, but I really like this Bug Out. And I think the combination of the two at $200 ends up being something that I feel like is entirely different than the Bug Out itself. You're welcome to have beef with me about this particular choice being included here, but at the same time, this feels like a knife that Benchmade should have made, and it has turned into a knife that I really do enjoy carrying, genuinely speaking. This is something that I think is worth going the extra mile to do yourself because, well, otherwise you're not getting a Bug Out this good. And so to me, the Flytanium scales on the Bug Out make it a very, very different beast, and especially with the crossfade artistic sort of thing, to me, this is absolutely one of the better mid-range knives to emerge this year. Going to this very nice high design scale is just good. And so, to me, these are the three choices on the mid-range. The tactile knife Bear, the TRM Shadow, and the Benchmade Bug Out with the Flytanium scales. Then finally, on the high end, there are three different options for you. But first off, some honorable mentions, one of which is the Knife Nuts Podcast Micro Evo. This is a really cool knife. I like Brian Nadeau's work a lot, and in a lot of ways, I think he intended to have a lot more stuff out, but the supply chain bit him pretty bad this year in a variety of different ways. But this is a really nice knife, and it's one that I've really enjoyed carrying and getting. And I think, yeah, so there's a lot of joy there. But more importantly, more even amazingly, so to speak, is the Skiff Blades Drifter. This is a knife I no longer have, but it is an absolutely amazing piece, and it is one of the most impressive objects I have held, right? Even though it didn't end up sticking around because a lot of it just made it a little bit less for my everyday carry, it is a really, really nice choice. And for somebody who really likes high-end machining and things like that, that's going to be a contender. But ultimately, availability just isn't high enough for it to be a legitimate contender here. Then finally, on the high-end side, we have this little guy right here as an honorable mention. This is the James brand knives at Barnes. As a knife, this absolutely belongs in Knife of the Year. This is one of the better knife designs of this year. It is profoundly well made. It is profoundly well done. In fact, every single thing about this knife is done great, except the price. At the price, this is not a Knife of the Year contender. They put this guy at $600, which is just a ton of money for what it is. It's a great knife. It is a Knife of the Year contender, but unfortunately, yeah, that's where it loses. This kills the crab, unfortunately, and so that could have been it here, but unfortunately, the bean counters kept it out. So let's look at what did make the cut. First off, on this guy is the Herman Knives Ishtar. This is one heck of a knife, and this is going to be the most expensive knife on the table by a pretty wide margin. It's $1,675. You can find other versions of the Ishtar knife a little bit less expensive from Herman, but at the same time, this one, particularly with the Damacore, with the Damascus inlays and whatnot, the machining is pricey. But it is also one of the nicer pocket knives I have handled. Herman Knives did incredible work here. These are really, really good, and I've become a gigantic Herman fanboy because not only is the work good, but the work keeps getting better and better and better. And so to me, that is absolutely amazing. And it has great details, great materials, and frankly, great treatment of those great materials. It's one thing to use really nice materials, but a lot of people screw them up. I feel like they didn't here, right? And so Herman Knives is a person who's gone from a who to a whoa over the last few years, and this is very much a production knife, but it's also a reminder that production doesn't necessarily mean boring. So that's a really nice choice. Next up is the Quiet Carry Drift 2. It's not technically called the Drift 2, I think. It's just the thumb stud drift here. But the thing is, the thumb stud is the meaningful difference, and it takes this knife from being the first generation, which was a little bit different, right? In fact, the first generation drift was one of the very most painful near misses I have ever felt on this channel, right? Because it had a really poor opening method with a hole in the blade there and a detent that wasn't well tuned to it that turned an amazing design into a very frustrating knife. Well, turns out this year they fixed it. They nailed it, as a matter of fact, by moving to a great detent and really nice thumb studs while retaining the Vanax and stainless construction. I'm sorry, stainless as in it doesn't stain. This is titanium, which is stainless, but it's not stainless steel. Anyways, I digress. This is a knife that I absolutely could carry every day and would serve me well. Base model is $305, so it's going right over that line there. But you can get G10 models for $250 if you want to do that. I haven't reviewed those yet, but I'm sure they're probably pretty damn good. But this is a really nice choice. Then the final choice is actually this little guy right here. This is the Tactile Turn Rockwall. And actually, this is the thumb stud variant, but I should grab the flipper variant as well, because effectively this is going for either one of these, right? And these both are about $300. I'm being pretty general here, but like I said, there were the two models. There's the flipper model over here, and there's the thumb stud model. But in a lot of ways, they're both great, right? The Flipper is a really nice knife, and in fact, both of them are with very nice, thin, slicey stock, with a very carryable form factor, with neat texturing and execution on them. They're both quite good, and honestly, for me, the thumb stud model ends up doing all of the same things that the original model does, but it's just a little bit more compact and smooth to carry along the back here. And, you know, overall, it feels maybe a little bit more clean in terms of design. When it comes down to it, I'd rather carry the thumb stud variant, so I'm going to put that guy on the table right here. But both are really great knives, and especially for being the very first knife from a brand new American company, yeah, I'm pretty impressed. And by the way, it's worth highlighting that new companies dropping contenders in 2 categories in the same year. That's pretty impressive. So, to me, these are my candidates on the high end. The Ishtar is absolutely beautiful and really well made. The Drift is a really nice everyday carry choice, made better, well, frankly, made a contender by getting everything right in the second round. And the Rockwall is just very, very, very good. So anyways, there you go. Those are my high-end contenders. Let's go to the semifinal round. And we'll start off actually in the budget round. So remember, our budget contenders here, running out of desk space, were these 3 knives. We have the Arroyo here from Artisan. We have the Crkt, sorry, I looked at it, the Crkt Ritual and the Savi Baby Banter. So, this was actually the hardest decision of all of these to make in the semifinal round, because the Ritual, look, it's a little crazy. And in a lot of ways, I think it's concept and I think it's art more than it is EDC. I'm sure somebody out there is carrying this and really loving the fact that they're carrying this, but at the same time, in terms of practicality, I don't think this is going to be the final choice. And so, although I think it did belong in this video, and I think it is one of the interesting choices this year, I don't think it's going to the next stage. The harder choice to make is actually among these 2 here. This is the Baby Banter and the Arroyo. The Arroyo is a much more interesting choice for daily carry for a lot of people, right? Especially for the, compared to the Ritual, absolutely. But it is a very, very good daily knife, right? It is in a size range that will work for most people. It has a little flat, a little belly, a nice tip here. The steel is very, very good. This is just a really good everyday carry choice, and it's going to appeal to a huge number of your more conventional EDC people. Right? It's pretty excellent. But the Baby Banter is a knife that I think goes a little bit above and beyond the world of EDC people. Sure, it's going to be a great choice for EDC people who are needing something small, but I think it's also a stellar knife for random folks outside the community who need a good cutting tool. In a lot of ways, this is probably going to be my favorite gift knife for people who don't know that they need to carry a knife or keep borrowing mine, but, oh, I don't know, I'd never carry a knife. Give them one of these, they'll start carrying a knife. So I think it is a knife that has a little bit more breadth to it. Honestly, this one could have gone either way, right? But I think I'm going to favor the choice that is going to be more likely to appeal to a broader audience outside of the knife world. Because let's face it, upswept Persian tips are not necessarily going to be what I'm going to hand to Irma from accounting. But at the same time, this guy is going to end up being my choice here. I'm going to go with the Baby Banter because I think it is a very, very nice knife. And I think it does belong, its wider appeal is going to make it, I think, a slightly better choice for a lot of folks. Then in the mid-range category here, we have the Shadow, we have the Flytanium Bug Out around here someplace, and we have the Tactile Bear. So, the Shadow is absolutely a great knife. I like it a lot, and I think it is going to be really good for a bunch of people in a bunch of situations, particularly if you want something thin and slicey, but that also works well with nice big hands, right? If you got big old meat paws, this is probably going to be your favorite TRM, especially if you want something a little bit beefy. But it also feels like there's going to be a future, it feels like it hasn't reached its final form yet, right? You know, the G10 and whatnot look really nice, but I think there's a way for this to go a step further. There's probably going to be a future version where it's just going to be like, oh yeah, that's the way it needs to be. And so I don't feel like they're quite there yet. Right? And the other big issue with this guy is availability remains a struggle. They are done mostly through lotteries because TRM is running at and beyond capacity. They're doing their best, but at the same time, as a result of this guy being really tough to get, I'm going to go on ahead and take this guy out of the running. Next one is the Flytanium Bug Out. This is a stellar knife, but it also requires 2 different companies to be in stock. And unfortunately, when you do something like this, you are at the mercy of fate to an extent because you've got Benchmade who needs to get you a Bug Out that's going to run run beautifully in this situation, and you have Flytanium. And it's not straightforward to do something like a warranty claim if this is something that, if you break an Omega spring or something like that, that can be a little bit more problematic. The end result is a very, very nice knife, but it's kind of a knife that you're a little bit more on your own about. And although, I appreciate the DIY aspects, I think a lot of people may not. And so as a result, although this is great, it's not going to be my final choice. That leaves behind the Bear here, which is absolutely purchasable. It is in a really nice final form, and it is good to go out of the box with full warranty from tactile and everything like that. So this is going to be my the mid-range choice. On the high end, we have, again, these three guys right here. We got the Ishtar, we got the Drift, and we have ourselves the Rockwall here. So on to start with the Ishtar here, this is an amazing knife, make no mistake. And in fact, it is certainly the nicest knife I handled all year, although I ended up buying another full-dress Herman, which may be right on the edge against this. Either way, it is a very, very, very nice knife. Certainly the handle on my desk. At some shows, I've seen some beautiful stuff I could never afford, but still, that's a different issue here. This is one of the nicest knives this may be the nicest knife in my collection. Either way, it is a very, very nice piece, right? But the thing is, it's a little harder to find, right? Herman is making regular drops, so I don't feel bad about leaving it in there, right? You can get Ishtars pretty, if you wait a few weeks, you can usually pick something up. But at the same time, it is also a lot less practical than the other options. It is a very, very large knife here, coming in just a hair, 3 3/4 inches. That's big. And it's also just, when you start to think about adding in both price and availability, this gets a little harder to call best. It is a beautiful piece, and absolutely, it's the nicest one I've shown you on the table here today, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to be best in the sense that it needs to be for this contest. Next up is the Rockwall. And the Rockwall, I'll go ahead and bring both on here. The Rockwall is a knife that is really, really good as a first outing. It is a knife I've recommended a bunch, probably more than any other knife so far this year, actually. I've made so many recommendations of this guy. It is very, very good. But the thing is, tactile is already through to the finals, right? And frankly, it just doesn't stand out as much from the crowd. There were other knives that do things that are very similar to these guys, right? I feel like they're good, but at the same time, they're not clearing their orbit so much. And so as a result, I think we're going to end up going with the Drift, which is available very regularly. It's very practical. It's an exceptional choice for stainlessness as well as general purpose EDC. And frankly, it's toward the bottom end of the price range rather than towards the top end. So to me, that's a beautiful, well, technically it's 300 and up, so there is no top end. This does not, none of them approach infinity. Anyways, I'm moving along here. Ultimately, the Drift is going to be my choice on the high end. So that brings us to our final round, right? We have the final countdown, the final showdown, if you will, comes here. I'll put So what we have are the Baby Banter, the Bear, and the Drift. These are three very, very different knives, and they're all three knives that I've been recommending over and over again. Right? When people say, hey, Nick, I need a pocket knife recommendation, especially people outside the knife world, I'll usually ask them about their price range, and there's a really good chance I might recommend any of these guys. The Drift has gotten a lot of recommendations from me, especially for people on boats and things like that. That's huge. This is a really nice traditional sort of thing that is also very, very modern, and this guy is really, really functional, and I think is going to be appealing to a broader swath of the world. That said, the Baby Banter here is a really great knife. It's got super wide recommendability, but ultimately, I'll admit, it's not a knife that I think has also reached its final form. It's not a knife that I'm super excited by yet. It is ridiculously solid. It is a great tool. But the current form, I don't think, really captures my fancy in the way that the other two have done yet. I suspect that once Ben Banters, the designer of this guy, brings out more of it, well, Ben Peterson, technically, brings out more of his sense of humor and sense of whimsy, then it'll be the whole package. Then it'll be even easier to do. But right now, it is the best budget knife of the year, but I don't think it's the best knife of the year. And so we can take that off the table. And now we have to make the really tough decision. We have the Drift and the Bear. The Drift is a potential one-and-done knife in the same way that some past winners, like the Neutron or the Atom, or even the Malibu, have been, right? There are people with rust problems who are out on boats or who are swamp witches and live in the saltwater marshes. This is the perfect knife for them in a lot of ways. And this is a case study, an iteration, being able to take something from being really pretty good to incredible hit out of the park, right? This is a knife that I carry, and it is a knife that I enjoy carrying, and it is without a doubt one of the very best EDC choices on the market today. Make no mistake, this is a knife that I think will stand the test of time and will probably be a gem in the long term. As long as Quiet Carry keeps making these, you should keep buying them. They are very, very good. The Bear here is also absolutely amazing because it's doing something very old. That is, being a clip point slip joint with a thin, slicey blade, but it's doing it in a very new way, with super steels, with titanium, and with disassemblable construction, and all kinds of different materials they're starting to play around with, right? They are doing something old, and they're doing it in a new way, all of which in a form factor that is incredibly and uniquely thin, which makes this guy carry unlike anything else I've really handled on the channel, right? That is, and it's $100 less than the Drift here. Ultimately, this was a very, very hard decision. Very, very hard. But the choice came down to the fact that the Bear here is a knife that launched damn near perfect on the very first go, and it was only the second model out of a brand new company. Tactile Knife Company has gone from being a twinkle in Will Hodges' eye in 2020 to contenders in 2 different Knife of the Year categories in 2021. That is serious. And in the process, we gained another really great OEM here in the US, and this is really incredible. And to me, that is absolutely worth rewarding. So although the Drift will get pocket time aplenty from me, it is a very, very close second and will remain among my most recommended knives. For me, I think the Tactile Bear is the Knife of the Year. Year, of course, being spelled Y-E-X-A-R, because nothing makes sense anymore. So anyways, again, makers, if you see your work on the table, if you've seen your work on the table at any point during this video, you should be very, very proud. But Tactile Knife Company, well done. Seriously. I am so deeply impressed that not only did you not screw up your first one, but you made it a contender, and then your second one was too. Holy crap, guys. So keep up the good work. Take my damn money. Everybody else you saw on the table, really well done. And here's hoping that 2022 is both a better year in the knife world and that 2022 competes with the best of what we had this year, because the best of the best was still very, very, very good. So anyways, hope this has been interesting to you. Keep an eye out for the rest of the gear video coming up here soon, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the year. Bye now.